Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at one of my grocery store Phalaenopsis orchids. So I have two names here at the bottom of the video. I actually don't know which name is the correct one. I have people telling me, oh, it's Taiwan Peacock, and then I have others telling me it's actually Sogo David Peachy. And I went online, look at some of the photos of each, and I still can't decide. And it's not that it matters, but sometimes it's just kind of fun to try to ID an orchid. So end of 2019, I started to see the flower spike emerging, which was super exciting. And the reason I was super excited was because this orchid did not bloom last year, 2019, no bloom. It was after I repotted it, and it just didn't. It took its time recovering from the setback due to root rot, and then also a repot. So it's a new environment, new media, that kind of thing. So, end of 2019, it put out its first flower spike since the repot. And then the year prior to that, back in 2018 sometime, I believe, that's when I bought the orchid. So it skipped one flowering last year. And then mid-March 2020 was when it started to, I guess, plump up or mature its buds. And another thing I did differently this time with this orchid and some other orchids is that I use a stick to prop up the flower spike, train it to grow upwards, and then at some point I let it kind of hang naturally. It's no longer that pendant look, which I still love. This year I decided I wanted to, train the flower spikes as much as I can for my orchid so I can save some horizontal space. And that turned out to be rather helpful, because that way I don't have to worry too much about moving them slightly. Sometimes, mistakes do happen, and you may mistakenly break a flower spike or break off some of the buds. Like I said earlier, this orchid did not come with an ID, so I really don't know. Not that it matters really, but it's just nice to have a name tag that comes with an orchid, so you can research if you want the kind of proper care that you should give to this orchid based on its parentage. But without an ID, all I can go by is the typical Phalaenopsis orchid care. In terms of care, speaking of care, this orchid receives 1/4 cup of water each time. In winter time, I do occasionally scale back the water amount and reduce it down to about 1/8 of a cup. And fertilization routine basically is weekly with 25% concentration. And at the end of the month, I would definitely always just use pure water, nothing else, just water, and soak it really good to dissolve any soap buildup and then flush away any unwanted substance from within the media. This orchid is not fussy at all. I typically don't provide anything special to this orchid, and the fact that it didn't bloom last year, and the fact that I could tell that this orchid was still recovering from growing smaller leaves to growing larger leaves, I just knew that it was on its way to full recovery. So I didn't really do anything special. I knew whatever I was doing to this orchid was on the right track, so I just kept doing what I did. This orchid is not fragrant, but I think the color combination is interesting enough that makes up for it. It's that yellow background with red patchy slash pigments throughout. At first, when I first saw this orchid at grocery stores, I was thinking, gosh, it's just a terrible mistake, or it's just a hybridization gone bad, that like the color are so patchy and random. But if you know any Chinese people or Chinese background, the red and yellow color combination is actually a very auspicious, good luck color combination. So for, I think, people with Chinese background or Far East background, they would like this color combination, I think. I bought this orchid because of the red-yellow color combination, but also because at that time I think I was just bored. I did not buy any orchid for quite some time, and I wanted to buy something, and I came across this orchid at a grocery store, so I bought it. But other than that, I'm not crazy about the flower and the orchid they don't have any modeling or anything special. So it's just a typical grocery store fowl in my collection, but I'm still glad that it rebloomed, because that means the care that I have provided so far is adequate. Some new Chinese subscribers did ask me how I can tell if an orchid is on its way back to full recovery, and I think the easiest way is to look at the leaves. If the newer leaves are the same size or bigger, then that means this orchid is definitely on the right track. But if the flowers are still smaller than previous ones, then it probably still needs additional improvement, whether it's light, whether it's nutrition, watering. You just kind of have to figure it out, do a couple different things to figure it out. This orchid is in semi-hydro setup and already have roots toward the bottom of the cup, so it gives me a great deal of flexibility in terms of water amount that I provide to this orchid. I no longer need to fill up the water to the drainage hole area, so the reservoir has never quite been full since it grew its roots into the reservoir. It has quite a bit of aerial roots, so this is one area where I am debating whether I should repot this orchid just to plant the aerial roots back into the media to allow this orchid to have more roots to grow and intake water and nutrients from within the media. Another benefit of repotting this orchid would be that I will get to save some horizontal space because the way that the area roots are growing, it's taking up a lot of space, and yes, I can kind of still squeeze in more orchids in between area roots, but whenever I need to move any orchid, there's always that danger of breaking off or damaging development. Speaking of damaging development, if you happen to rupture the development of your orchid, don't worry, it's not that big of a deal. You just need to allow time to keep it dry and allow time for it to scab over, form the scar, and it would be fine. So if I am repotting an orchid and then somehow some roots are damaged, I would just let it dry for the first week without watering it, and then gradually introduce moisture and water to the media, and after 2 weeks time, usually you can resume the regular water amount that you typically provide to that particular orchid. So that's what I do, and it has been working out pretty well. So now if you ever break any development, just don't worry, keep it dry for a couple of days and then gradually introduce water, and that way you won't have any root rot issue just because that there is any potential rupture on development. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!